advisor fee and services benchmarking report, but if we have some time, I'll also jump through the Prism report. The great thing about these is that they are both very simple and very easy to run. So it really shouldn't take too much time at all to go through them. But I do want to show you the output of those reports as well, so you get an idea of what your clients and prospects would actually see if you're using these reports. So I'll start with my Prism365 advisor fee and services report here. And you'll see at the top that we require some basic information about your plan. So we'll ask for the plan name, the total plan assets, and then the number of participants. These are going to affect the universe band that we fall into, and make sure that we're comparing accurately against the correct number, the correct plan sizes. We ask here as well for your current advisory fee. Let's put this as 35 basis points. And if you are charging any additional fees for 338 services, we'll ask for that here as well. Then what we do is we go through and we break down the different sections of services that you're likely offering to your clients. So in investment analysis, we're going to ask if you're doing investment selection, menu selection and monitoring, if that's part of your base fee. How frequently are you doing those types of meetings? Do you have 321 services that you're offering? Are you doing 338 services as well? So you can really select and illuminate what you're doing in terms of all that investment analysis. In provider and fee benchmarking, we ask here if you're doing annual fee benchmarking. Are you doing live bid benchmarking as well? And if so, how frequently are you presenting that to a plan sponsor? In the fiduciary service section, we're looking at here primarily fiduciary education for your clients. So how often are they receiving education and training, and is that included? Are you doing fiduciary process review? And then how often are you taking a look at that with those plan sponsors? And then down here in the employee engagement section, this is where a lot of the big differentiators for advisors become very clear. So being able to say how many education and enrollment days you're offering, this can be something that drastically improves the amount of service that you're giving to a client and can really justify a higher advisor comp fee. What the fee is for those additional days if you are offering them, if you're doing one-on-one employee education or consulting, and then what sort of employee wellness program you're using, if anything at all. So Jesse mentioned, there's obviously options from the record keepers where they have some of their own proprietary tools. You could have some of your own tools that you're using, or you might be using a third party as well. And then down at the bottom here, we have what we call additional value-added services. And these are things that you can sort of skim through and see which ones you might be offering to your plan sponsors. You'll notice that on the right there, we can also add in any additional services that you might be adding. So if there's something that you're doing that really sets you apart from other advisors out in the field, and you want to make sure that that's highlighted as part of this analysis, you can click on this add your own button there, and it's going to then add that as one of those additional value-added services that you're offering as part of your service model. So now what I'll do is I'll walk you through the output of this report. As you saw from the input side there, it took us 2 minutes, and that was explaining every single field that we were going through. So you can imagine that going through it yourself with a client you're already familiar with is probably only going to take you a minute from start to finish. And the output of the report here, as you'll see, is going to really highlight where your service model stacks up versus other plans of similar size. So we've got our title page here. This would include your company logo, obviously your name and your contact information there as well. When we scroll through, we first get a page that just breaks down what all of those different services that you're offering are, gives some information about the benchmark, and then just that list over here on the right. And then as we go through, we're going to start breaking down those individual sections into the output for you here. So you see the additional services that we highlighted on the input side. And again, if you added any of your own, they would appear in here as well. We have the summary of the current advisory fees. So this is going to be comparing as a whole where your advisory fees stack up versus other plans of similar size. When we go over to the Prism report, you'll see that this is actually pulling that same sort of data from there, where you're just comparing it to the low, average, and high of the benchmark universe, which represents roughly the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile of plans of this size. So in this case, our plan is a little bit above the average here, but as we'll be able to highlight, we are offering a pretty high level of service here in this report. We start out with the investment due diligence services. You can see that we have this chart up at the top that talks about some of the different features that we have here. So 321 services, part of the base fee, for example, 94% of advisors are including that as part of the base fee. Investment selection monitoring, 99% of advisors doing that. And then we see the frequency of committee meetings is broken down in this chart below. So in our case, we're doing semi-annually, which only 42% of advisors are doing, where 38% of them are doing annual meetings and 20% doing quarterly. On this next page, we're looking at the fee benchmarking and fiduciary services. Again, going through each of these, we've got the charts that highlight our frequency of live bid RFP. In this case, overwhelmingly, advisors are doing it once every 3 years, but there are a pretty big contingent as well that are doing it every 4 or 5 years. And then the frequency of that fiduciary process review, we have that broken down here as well. In this case, most advisors doing this annually as well. On the employee engagement side, this is where we start to see some of that great value come in for those advisors who are doing additional work from the financial wellness side of things. So for example, here we're seeing one-on-one and employee education consulting included in most cases. Education days offered, the overwhelming are doing between 1 and 4 days. But when it comes to the actual financial wellness program, the vast majority are using the record keeper solutions, and only very few are doing third-party systems or proprietary. So this could be a nice way in our example, we're doing a proprietary financial wellness program where that additional fee could be justified because there's a ton of work that goes into implementing financial wellness for a plan sponsor. And this can really highlight that as part of this analysis here. And then following this, we have this disclosure page where, of course, you'll be able to populate your own disclosure in here and make sure that everything is well taken care of from a compliance perspective. Really, though, that's the entire Prism365 report in a nutshell. As you can see, it's a very simple process. However, the output can be very powerful and very useful in walking your clients through what that value is that you're adding to their plan. So they don't just see a number on the screen that says, hey, our advisor fee is a little bit higher than average. You can really justify that cost by showing them all the additional value that you're adding from a service perspective. And what I want to do now is actually quickly take you through the Prism report as well, because this is another one of our core reports here that can be super useful when working with a client or especially with a prospect as well. You'll see that when we're on the main PlanFees site, we just have the option to go to either one. I'll jump into our Prism report here. And once again, you'll see we ask for some high-level information at the top: plan name, plan type, whether or not they have a TPA. And the actual data required to run this report is just what you're seeing here on the screen. You'll see that it's 6 fields, 5 if there's no TPA. And we're going to ask for plan assets, number of participants, investment fees, record keeping fees, and advisor fees. And then once we enter that in, we're going to create our Prism benchmark, which is going to pull in the universe of similar plans to compare this one against. You'll see that in my example here, we're looking at plans that are between 3.5 and 6.5 million. And in this case, we're comparing against roughly 2,300 plans that are in that universe. You'll notice as well that we've got these slider bars for the universe that we're looking at. So we're easily able to make this more broad or more narrow as necessary. If I go down to 3 million here on the lower end, for example, you'll see we jump up to 2,800 plans. If we were to go over here on the right up to 7 million, we'll jump up to just over 3,000 plans. And the benchmark universe that we're using here is built off of real plans that have been benchmarked by advisors within the last 3 years. So rather than using 408B2 data, which is going to include plans that never get serviced, potentially includes plans that are up to 10 years old, we wanted to make sure that the plans were accurate. We wanted to make sure that they were up to date, and we wanted to make sure they were plans that were actively serviced by advisors as well. You'll also have the ability here to add a plan participant filter. So if your client does have an exceptionally high or low average account balance and you want to make sure that that's reflected, you can check that box and then narrow down the universe pretty significantly to show that. And then down here at the bottom, we have a chart that summarizes what that output looks like, where we have our plan versus the low, average, and high. And we can see how our plan compares to roughly the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile of plans in the universe. But once we've gone through this, we can then pull up the actual output of the report. And as you can see, this one is a pretty straightforward output as well. Just 5 pages here, includes that title page and the disclosure at the back. But once again, it would have your logo here, your name, your contact information. On the first page, we break down our plan info, benchmark info, and then some of those fields at a high level, just looking at a dollar perspective here at first, and we'll get more detailed as we go along. On the next page, we break out that same chart that you saw on the input side, where we show our plan versus the low, average, and high in terms of investments, record keeping, advisory, total fees, and per participant. So we can see where our plan stacks up and what areas might need more or less attention. There's also some charts down here at the bottom that help to visualize some of those numbers to get a breakdown of what your fees look like, how that roughly compares to other plans in the universe. And on this last page here is where we really visualize what those fees look like. And this can be a very nice place to just tell a story to your clients of what sorts of where they might need attention for their plan. So my example here, as you can see, we're on the high end with investments, we're above the high with our record keeping, but we're right at about the average with the advisory. And this can be a nice place to highlight where some of your other services can be really useful for them as well. So if we're seeing that record keeping fee much higher than we would expect, you can go to that client and say, you know, your record keeping fee is higher than most plans in this size. We'd love to take a look at a live bid analysis for you and really see if we can get that record keeping cost lowered for you, you know, especially with a prospect that's a really compelling story. Same thing with the investments. If you go to a prospect and say that your investment fee is looking much higher than we would expect for plans of this size, we'd love to explore looking at more efficient share classes for you, or potentially even looking at another platform at your current record keeper, or even, you know, another record keeper altogether to get you access to some of those lower cost funds. So a really nice place here to really show where you as the advisor can add value for this plan sponsor. And then once again, the last page here, just a disclosure for you as well. But those were the 2 reports there through PlanFees. As you can see, you know, very simple and straightforward in terms of reports, but very powerful output that can really help you with telling a story to current clients, to prospective clients, and doing so in a really timely and efficient manner as well.